How many of you have lived here more than 20 years? Raise your hands. That's good. So how many of you moved here in the last 2 years? Longer ago than 5 years? Okay, that pretty much answers the question. So it's about 50-50 or maybe 60-40 with some longtime local residents here. Wayne was one of the first people I met when I started with the city of Myrtle Beach a little more than 25 years ago. 25 years ago last month, in fact. He was on city council at that point. And I spent the first 6 months of my career writing down every word that Wayne said. And then realized I didn't have to do that because my memory was sufficient and Wayne talked more than I needed to write down, frankly. But Wayne's been involved in the life of the city of Myrtle Beach literally his whole life. I see his family is here in the room as well today. You know, in my short 25 years, I've seen Grissom Parkway, Highway 31, Highway 22, the development of the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. I still know where the back gate is and still call it the back gate when I don't think far enough ahead. And the front gate, I live nearer the front gate, frankly. So there's been a lot of changes in that amount of time. And Wayne's going to go through a little bit of those predating that, plus also in the recent history. Wayne Gray.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. I got to tell you, two things that I'm not shy of. One is a microphone and a camera. But I'm a little nervous today. I've been anxious as to how well this would go, how well it would be attended. I thank you for taking time out of your day to come here and listen to a little bit of the Sally Howard up there telling me, make sure the microphone's a little closer. A little bit about Horry County and its growth and development, and then Myrtle Beach, and then the contributions that I'm proud to say my family has made to this community for the, you'll see where my 7th great grandfather migrated from Dumfries, Scotland to Charleston to Highway 90 about 1750s that we can date it back, and I've got some history there. I do want to take a minute though to make a couple of introductions. This is my hour, so I get to do what I want, right? First, I do want to thank John Crutch. John Crutch is on City Council candidate this November. Thank you, John. Randall Wallace, who I served with, is also a candidate for City Council this November. Bill McClure, Bill offered himself for mayor, and then he's a candidate for City Council this year, and that's all that's running. Having been a part of public service and running for office and winning and losing and being a part of that, I applaud people who offer themselves for office, and I wish all three of you the best of luck, and thank you for what you've also given. I also want to introduce a couple of other folks. My uncle, Bob Gray. His wife, Karen. And then my cousin, John Nance. Clay Nance, I'm sorry. John is in his name, but he goes by Clay. Keep it up a little higher. I was thinking about I got a little PowerPoint that I put together, and I was thinking about, I'll share some of what it was like in my life to be here basically growing up in the 70s and the 80s. I just turned 55. My birthday was Saturday, September the 16th. And thank you very much. And also, I need to say I've got several members from the Sunday school class that I attend. Y'all raise your hand. There we are. At First Presbyterian Church, the Theophilus Sunday school class. And I was thinking about what it was like here when we were this little seaside village, but expanded into this tourism mecca in the 70s and the 80s when I was growing up. And it was much like a simple life, and I started to think about Forrest Gump. Because Forrest Gump's a little simple, right? And then it reminded me, have y'all heard the story about when Forrest Gump died and he went to heaven to meet St. Peter? Well, I'll tell it to you. So Forrest goes, he dies, and he goes to St. Peter and pearly gates. And St. Peter says, Forrest, well, before we can let you in to the pearly gates, we're going to ask you 3 questions. You've got to give us an answer. They've got to be correct. Those 3 questions, we'll let you in. I'm going to give them to you and let you think about them. And the first one was, how many days are there in the week? The second question is, how many seconds are in a year? And then the third question, which is probably the most important, is what is God's name? So overnight, he thought about it. And the next day, he was ready. He had his answers, and he shows up. He's excited about entering the pearly gates. St. Peter says, did you think about it? I sure do. Says, okay. Well, the first question, how many days in the week? Today and tomorrow. And, well, not really what I was looking for, but technically correct. Okay. Well, Forrest, how many seconds are there in a year? 12. January 2nd, February 2nd, March 2nd. Not quite the answer he was looking for, but he said, all right, most important one. And Forrest was ready for this one. And he said, Forrest, what is God's name? And before he could finish the question, he yelled out, Andy. Andy? Yeah, from that favorite hymnal, Andy walks with me, Andy talks with me. So with that in mind, let's open in prayer, if you will. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity today to join together, reflect on memories and the history of this community and how it's enriched our lives. We thank you for the people that are here. We thank you for the leaders of the city of Myrtle Beach, family members of mine and friends. And God, we thank you for this sacred place, this library that has enriched the lives of so many people and will continue to do so. And so just bless this time and our opportunity together where we laugh, we may cry, we may argue, we may disagree. But God, when we leave this place, that we will follow your command to love you with all our heart and all our mind and all our soul and love our neighbor as we love ourselves. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you for allowing me to do that. So I got to kind of divide it up in a little bit 3 parts. First, I want to go through a little PowerPoint. You know, Horry County, people call it the Independent Republic, the Long Bay area because of the curvature of our coastline. It's also known as the Waccamaw area after the Waccamaw Indians that were in this area. And then obviously in the 50s sometime, I think a writer for the Sun News named it the Grand Strand. I think that was 1954. But just a beautiful seaside community. And I heard somebody describe it where where the beach is your front yard. Just here we go. You may not be able to read this. I'm sorry if you can't. But I've done this before to just give a little bit of history of the development of Horry County. So basically in the 1500s, obviously the Waccamaw Indians, which are also another Indian group that was here, they're a part of the Waccamaw Indians, Shakur. That's where the name Shakur comes from. Basically in the 15 and 1600s, this area was explored by the English, the Spanish, and the Italians. Most of the settlements obviously are going to always be where there's water. So most of the settlements that first occurred were at the mouth of the Winyah Bay, i.e. the town of Georgetown or the Georgetown community, which fights with Beaufort as to whether or not it's the second or third oldest city in South Carolina behind Charlestown, now Charleston. But in 1670, South Carolina was settled by the English. In 1720, it's identified as a royal colony. Charlestown is the capital. And at that time, Charlestown was the wealthiest colonized area in the entire colonization of America, mainly because of rice and indigo and the other crops that they were able to grow and the port. The early development of Horry County basically was around Conway. So from 1731 to 1734, and exact Conway claims it in 1732, Kingstown, that then became Kingston Township and District, we were all a part of the All Saints Parish, which was a part of the Georgetown District. Most of the English that came to settle in South Carolina and Horry County came from Virginia and North Carolina. We had some Scots-Irish that came here via England and some Ireland settlements. And mainly what happened, and one of the reasons Conway got developed and his little settlements outside of that would get developed was to have outposts, if you will, up the Waccamaw River and the other rivers that came in to form the Winyah Bay to protect Georgetown from either the Indians, the Native Americans that were here, the Spanish, or there could have been some slave uprisings. And Georgetown was heavily in growing indigo and rice, as was the Charleston area, which made them as wealthy as they were. You had some little settlements in the 1730s in Little River. Again, there's water source there where you can fish, you can eat, you can have water to drink. There was a large plantation, the William Gauls plantation. And what began to happen was you had folks living in the Conway area, you had folks living in the Little River area, and today's present-day Highway 90 became a natural trade corridor. In fact, where Highway 22 and 90 intersect, there's a sign there that reads Hand, H-A-N-D. That was called the Hand Community. There was a postmaster location was there, and that's where folks would travel in their covered wagons, and they would trade crops for fish and clothing and everything. It was just a lot of people living off the land, and they just bartered in trade for what they needed. And about this time, Horry County The main surnames were Withers, Vaught, Todd, Chestnut, Galls, Vereen. We were the smallest county in the state with less than 2,000 people. I put in there at 1747, my seventh great-grandfather, Thomas Charles Todd, arrives in Charleston and eventually moves up to Conway, living on the Highway 90 area, again because it's along the Waccamaw River. In 1790, which was America's first census, we were still a part of Georgetown. At that time, there was really no formation of Horry County. And so for the 1790 and the 1800 census, Horry County was a part of Georgetown census count. Our first census in Horry County was in 1810. We all know that in 1791, George Washington visited the area, traveled from Little River to Surfside to Georgetown, actually traveled on parts of Old Kings Highway, which is parts of Kings Highway today, whether you're in the Myrtle's Inlet area or whether you're in North Myrtle Beach. One of the first churches, Kingston Presbyterian Church in Conway, which was still in existence today, was established in 1756. You had some Methodist ministers to come visit in 1775. You had the Conway Methodist Church formed in 1785. And these churches, some didn't have enough of attendance and ceased, and they redeveloped in the mid-1800s. Those churches' focus was on social justice issues and programs concerned with folks' salvation and moral direction. We eventually had some Episcopalian growth, and then eventually Southern Baptists grew here in about the mid-1800s, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the Southeast and in America. I have that in there because I shared this with the men's group of the First Presbyterian Church when I gave this presentation. But I think it's important because it's obviously a huge focus and fabric of our life. Basically, what we were in this time, we were an undeveloped eastern frontier. The people farmed, hunted, and fished, living off the land, and they just traded and bartered for what they needed. Again, through most of the 1700s, we're less than 2,000 to 3,000 inhabitants. This is a picture of Kingston Township, 1775, a picture of a map from 1775. And by the way, if you have any questions, might as well go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you because it would be pertinent to what we're discussing right now. Let's go from 1800 to 1900. In 1801, we're in the Horry district. Kingstown is now named Conway Borough. Of course, Horry is named after Peter Horry. He was a French Huguenot from Georgetown. He served under Francis Marion in the state militia. He actually was a commissioned colonel in the American Army, in the American forces, but when Charlestown was captured by the British, he was decommissioned, and then that's when he came to basically serve under Francis Marion in the South Carolina militia. Conway, everything's developing around water, right? Conway because of the Waccamaw River, Little River because of the inlet, and then Galvat's Ferry began to develop a little bit because of the Little PD River. And then you had some developments in Socastee, again, a part of the Waccamaw River, and Bucksport, which is also on the western part of the Waccamaw River. Still, I just checked it today, in 1810, in the 1810 census, just to make sure, we were still at about 3,000 inhabitants in 1810. We grew to about 7,000 inhabitants in 1850. Still the smallest county in the state. Now, of that 7,000, 5,000 were considered white persons and 2,000 were considered slaves. In contrast, in 1850, Georgetown County had 20,000 inhabitants, 2,000 white and 18,000 slaves, just for perspective. Obviously because of the indigo and rice that you could grow in the Georgetown County area. Obviously something that was transformative, and there's going to be a couple of names that I'm going to reference in here that everybody's going to know, Franklin G. Burroughs and Simeon Chapin. As I finish this presentation, though, there's a lot of other names that I will mention. Some I'm sure I'm going to leave out. But, in 1857, Franklin G. Burroughs lands in Conway. He's from Williamston, North Carolina. He comes to work here at a mercantile store to learn how to basically be in that business, a general merchandise store. And then, of course, we all know what happens in 1861. The Civil War initiates. Other names that you hear of it down here, the war between the states. I even have people call it the War of Northern Aggression. You choose whatever you want to call it. The reality of it is we had a war. There's little battle activity in Horry County. We did, of course, join the Confederacy. What was mostly happening in Horry County, we were basically just low-lying swampland area. And I'll get to a point, but bear in mind the Intracoastal Waterway had not been built yet. The man-made portion of the Intracoastal Waterway, which basically runs from the Little River Inlet to where the Waccamaw River comes into Cycastee. So imagine the man-made portion would be from the swing bridge at Cycastee to the swing bridge at the Little River Inlet. Little activity, but what we would have, because we were this small inhabited area, we had a lot of swamps and lowlands where you could hide out. A lot of deserters, both from the Confederate and the Union armies, would come to Horry County and desert from their respective posts. We know the stories about the salt works that were destroyed by the Union Army at Singleton Swash, which is the Dunes Club, and Wither Swatch, which was 3rd Avenue South. I've got some family names here: Chestnut Todd and Arthur Benton. Great story about them in 1865. So Chestnut Todd, which is I think 4th, 5th, maybe great-grandfather, he was not serving in the war, and one of few men because he probably wasn't capable physically. And so he was responsible for passing out rations of food and clothing to the women and children that were left behind. Arthur Benton was also from Horry County. He was a deserter from the Confederate Army. Now, depending on where you are on this family, the story differs. If you're from the Chestnut Todd side, Arthur Benton, Chestnut Todd was also responsible of turning in deserters to the Army. He was going to turn in Arthur Benton. Arthur wasn't going to let him do that, so he came to where this facility was where they passed out all these rations. A fight ensued, and Arthur Benton killed him. If you're on from the Arthur Benton side of the family, it was because Chestnut Todd wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. He wasn't passing out the rations of food and clothing and whatever else was needed for the elderly and the women and the children that were left behind. And so he went to correct him on that. And then again, a fight ensued. And anyway, what ended up happening was Arthur Benton killed Chestnut Todd. But 3 generations later, which we'll get to meet, 2 great-grandchildren, boys, marry 2 great-granddaughters, brothers, marry sisters. 3 generations later. So when we have that family reunion, it just kind of depends on what side of the family you're on, which story you want to believe. I thought I'd share that with you. So, moving through the 1865 to 1900, we start to have the development of naval stores along the Waccamaw River, pine, tar, titch, and turpentine, and that becomes the development of Burroughs and Collins, which is related to the Myrtle Beach Farms Company, which is related to Burroughs and Chapin Company. 1868, we're named from Horry District to Horry County. Civil War has ended. Reconstruction is occurring. South Carolina adopts a constitution, start establishing counties. 1870, my great-great-grandfather, Erasmus Robert Lally Todd, nicknamed Lally, and his wife, Aramissa Matilda Edge, first cousins, by the way. Now, just imagine, there ain't but about 5,000 people living in Horry County, most of them along Highway 90. Wasn't anybody visiting here, so it was just my necessity that you married your first cousin or second cousin or third. They, along with Erasmus's older brother, William Todd, moved from Highway 90 to 17th Avenue South, basically just across the street where AVX used to be located. So where Beaver Road and 17th South intersect, they began to develop a farm there, and the stories differ as to how much land that they own from there all the way to 3rd Avenue, to Wither Swash. And just, Erasmus and his wife Aramissa have 7 children, of which my great-grandmother is one of them. But so that's where my family begins to establish its roots, right here in present-day Myrtle Beach. It's probably only about 300 people living in the Myrtle Beach, what we know as the Myrtle Beach area at that time. 1883, Conway's renamed from Conway Borough. Then 1887, the railroad from Conway to Chadbourne and Wilmington, that begins to open up markets for us to sell things that are being made here to the north. But then all of a sudden in 1883, we have a major hurricane, there's a depression, it just really ravages this area, destroys the rice, cotton, and naval stores. It's a grim economic outlook, and what do? You just turn to the land. So we started doing more timber production and farming of other crops. Now, during this period is when Burroughs and Collins acquires a vast amount of land between Conway and the modern-day Myrtle Beach, basically along the 501 corridor, and other areas in the county exceeding 80,000 acres of land. You didn't have anybody that wanted to come over here in Myrtle Beach. You couldn't grow crops in those sand spurs along the beach. But we'll see how that develops. 1897, Franklin G. Burroughs dies. His sons takes over the business, and basically they're in a business of owning and farming land and wood. Here's a couple of other things. 1807, Green Sea Baptist. 1866, Conway Baptist. 1872, Eden Missionary Baptist Church was the first name of what is now known as the First Baptist Church of Myrtle Beach. 1888, Cycles T. Baptist. We've got several members from First Baptist Church of Myrtle Beach, which is where my great-grandparents and my great-grandfather and grandfather and father and uncle and cousin, spent a lot of time, and a lot of their life was involved around what was Eden Missionary Baptist Church, now called First Baptist. So we'll move in. There's a 1820 map of Horry County, or Horry District, because we're not now named Horry County yet. I know that's hard to see. So I'm going to move kind of from Horry County to Myrtle Beach, because Myrtle Beach really started to get established around 1900. From 1900 to 1910, the rail line was built to what we were known as, which was Newtown. In a way, Conway was known as Old Town, because it was the old town. And then we're the new town, so we're the new town. And then, of course, you know the story where Miss Addie Burroughs, there was a contest of what to name Newtown, and because of the abundance of wax myrtles, she named it Myrtle Beach, and the name has stood, has taken. And about this time, which was the turn of the 20th century, 1900, the inhabitants of Horry County is right at about 23,000. Again, we're one of the 5 smallest states in the county. Just for comparison, today, we're the 4th most populous county in the state. So you can imagine the growth that we've experienced. Now things start to really happen. And Myrtle Beach changes and grows because of just natural things, obviously, that occurred nationwide. But here, in 1907, electricity starts to come to Horry County, certainly, and scattered around, obviously. And a lot of people don't know this. But in 1912, Simeon B. Chapin forms a partnership with the Burroughs family, creating Myrtle Beach Farms. So a lot of the land that was owned by Burroughs and Collins, one of the original precursors of what is now called Burroughs and Chapin, and for a while, for many years, was known as Myrtle Beach Farms, about 65,000 acres of this land was conveyed to the new company. And you can see there in mercantile, hotel, amusement, real estate, general farming, land development, construction. A lot of people don't really realize that while it's Burroughs and Chapin and they were business partners, they didn't know each other, right? I mean, you saw where I said in 1897 is where Mr. Burroughs died. 1912 is when Mr. Chapin becomes interested in partnering with his sons. The company at that time was a little cash-strapped, and so they needed a partner. And Mr. Chapin basically was an entrepreneur, industrialist, financier, whatever word you want to use, from Chicago, Illinois. And actually, he was looking at some property in North Carolina, and a realtor had introduced him, or a business person had introduced him to the opportunity to partner with the Burroughs sons and acquire 65,000 acres of land. Interesting here, in 1915, we've got some members from First United Methodist Church opened. The land is donated by Simeon B. Chapin. Buddy Stires is a member of that church. Buddy also was one of the guest speakers last year and a graduate with my dad in 1959, Myrtle Beach High School. 1926 through 1939, Myrtle Beach Farm sells 64,000 acres to John T. Woodside and his brother. They basically were textile magnates from Greenville. They developed the Ocean Forest Golf Course and Hunt Club, which now we know as Pine Lakes Country Club. And then the Ocean Forest Hotel, which opened in 1931. They planned this, they had this area planned and developed, and they were going to call it Arcadia. But of course, the Great Depression forces the foreclosure and tax lien sale, and a lot of the land that they owned that it would have eventually developed reverts back to Myrtle Beach Farms, except for the golf course and the hotel. The bank had already taken those back and then sell those to outside parties. I think that transaction, if I recall, was $900,000. And they put $100,000 down. The company took back an $800,000 mortgage. So you can imagine buying 64,000 acres of land for $800,000. Thinking, there's some places you can't get a half acre for $800,000 today. Obviously, the Great Depression takes its toll on farming and other things and businesses that we're involved in. Then Horry County eventually moves away from what we were cropping at that time and in the timber business to tobacco and cotton. 1928, First Presbyterian Church begins service. Cecil Brierley, who is the grandfather of our current minister, John Brierley, was a minister at Kingston Presbyterian Church in Conway, so he became what we call a supply minister, and he was holding every services every Thursday until 1939. Then in 1928, Myrtle Beach Farm sells 47,000 of that 64,000 acres to the precursor of International Paper Realty. It was referred to as the Buste Tract, but it is basically what you know today as the modern-day Carolina Forest. And of course, International Paper Realty is the real estate division of International Paper, and they were obviously needing all of that land for its timber to produce paper. Horry County begins to benefit from a lot of public works projects benefit South Carolina, Horry County. We start to see the building of roads and water and sewer and the paving of really what was a lot of dirt roads. Here's probably one of the most transformative things of Horry County is the dredging of the Intracoastal Waterway from basically Little River to Socastee. It is the largest man-made portion of the Intracoastal Waterway, which goes from Maine to Miami. And so that area, now what it did, we were this low-lying swampy area. It drained somewhere between 10 to 12,000 acres of land. So just basically opening up that land for future development and opportunity. You don't dredge that waterway, that happened. The dredging of the waterway was twofold. One was to be able to move military assets up and down the coastline without being out in the Atlantic Ocean by the fear of being attacked by enemy, and then also to eventually move products and services along the barges that were moving. 1936, a great amenity that we have here that I hope everyone's enjoyed, the Myrtle Beach State Park. And then in 1938, Myrtle Beach incorporates as a town. There's roughly 1,500 residents. That was on March the 12th. I think that makes us 85 years old today. Basically, the town was from Witherswash to 16th North, was the center of town. I'll get to a picture and we'll talk a little bit about it. My great-grandfather, Daniel Wayne Nance, and who Nance Plaza is named after he and his wife, Mary Ellen Todd. He was a master builder in the Myrtle Beach at that time, built most of what we know as the super block and a lot of homes in the Witherswash neighborhood, which is the area in and around the post office. In fact, John Crutch lives at 201 Oak Street, which was a house built by my great-grandfather and was owned by his son-in-law, Jimmy Benton, and then it's been passed down to John. He's done a great job of remodeling. I don't know if John's still here or not. But my great-grandfather served on the committee that incorporated the town. In addition, and I'll show you a picture of this, at this time, county governments have not been developed in South Carolina yet. So basically what managed the unincorporated area of the county was the senator. Back in those days, the reason we have 46 senators is because there was a senator for each county. And so that state senator was the one that basically managed and governed the governmental services that were needed by the local community, but they divided the county up into townships. We're known as the Dogwood Neck Township. You may go read the deed of your real estate, and it'll say Myrtle Beach, Dogwood Neck Township, Horry, South Carolina. And my great-grandfather was the commissioner appointed by the senator of that township. And so he was obviously heavily involved both as a business owner and with First Presbyterian Church, First Baptist Church, and as a community leader. We'll just continue going on. Any questions? There's a map of 1910. As you can see, there's no Highway 501, but here's the railroad. It's coming into Myrtle Beach. And I can email this to anybody if they want to get it afterwards. Bear with me just a second here. This is obviously everything in the life. This is the courthouse that's still in existence today in Conway. It was built in 1915. Of course, the county built a new administrative and justice building just behind it, if you will. It sits right there on 4th Avenue. But there's still activity. And this is the map that I was telling you about, how the county was divided into townships. Each of these townships would have a commissioner, and that commissioner would be the liaison between the people and the citizens and generally the state senator. Because you had very little municipalities that had been developed during this time, and even if they did, they didn't have any money and couldn't really provide any governmental services. And so that's how, and what the state used to do is pass what they called a supply bill, and in that supply bill would be everything that senator from that county would request of services that the citizens needed. So World War II, which played a big role in Myrtle Beach, 1940s, the National Defense Act, war councils are seeking federal government investment. And what a lot of communities did nationwide, including Myrtle Beach, is the leaders at that time would form these war councils, and we would plead or make an argument to the federal government or Department of Defense as to why they should locate their facilities in Myrtle Beach. And so in 1945, Cecil Braley becomes the second permanent pastor serving First Presbyterian Church. But the Army, and in 1947, after, well, let me go back there. So the federal government takes possession of Myrtle Beach Airstrip, which is, current day airport, and develops an Army Corps base for training, flight, and target training, housing for German prisoners of war. And there were other sites in Horry County as well for a total of 96,000 acres and 6 campuses. I wasn't aware of that until I did a little bit of research. I knew they had a couple of campuses, the main one obviously being what we used to know as Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, which is today current Market Common. And they did a lot of flight training where they would drop ammunition and bombs in the Carolina Forest area, the Buse tract. All right, so the Army Air Base closes in 1947, but now we roll out of World War II and we're moving into the Cold War, the development of the atomic bomb. And so the United States government is wanting to expand the Air Force, and we again form a council to attract and lobby for the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. And it opened or reopened on 12/6/7 of 56, which just happened to be the 15th year anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And of course, the Air Force Base here was from 1956 until 1993 is when it closed. Okay, so let's roll into the 50s. Optimism, affluence, a love of leisure became its own industry. So, you think about what was happening in America, right? We go through the Depression. We go into World War II, we come out of that, and then it's just robust, and we're growing. We're starting to develop a middle class. Then all of a sudden, obviously, the interstate system starts to get developed. We're producing cars in mass production. So this whole idea of opening up the idea of tourism or travel, of being able to take vacation, begins to expand and grow into the American system beyond just the wealthy. Up until this time, basically, it was only the wealthy that went and traveled and experienced leisure. You have the interstate system expanding the middle class benefits. Myrtle Beach with new motels and motor courts replacing what were the guest houses here. Travelers from New York to Miami and Florida stop at the halfway point, which is us. And really what built Myrtle Beach originally in the 50s was the textile workers in North Carolina and South Carolina. Now, for 2 weeks, they'd shut down on 4th of July, and they would just fill up Myrtle Beach. But throughout the course of that 90-day period of tourism that we had, which was basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day, was mainly this North and South Carolinian textile workers, making Myrtle Beach their family destination. I don't need to tell you this. Pavilion was the center of all activity. We were roughly, again, a 90-day seaside village from Memorial Day to Labor Day. The shag is taking off. Horry County, the western part of Horry County, tobacco is king, and we have more grown in Horry County than any other place in the state. Obviously, we're a large county. We had a large vast of land, and everybody's heard of the Holiday family, which owned a lot of acreage in and around Gallivan's Ferry and Aner, where they farmed tobacco. In about 1950s, there's about 60,000 residents in Horry County. We just back up and say that around the 1900s till about the 1920s, what was made up on the ocean front were just these wooden beach cottages. There was a wooden boardwalk. The Seaside Inn got built. You had a few other bathhouses. But the only people that could travel back in that time were mainly industrialists or those that were in the textile industry in the upper part of the state or in North Carolina. And what really would happen is the wife and the kids would come down here and holiday. So they would stay for 4, 6, 8 weeks in these log cabins, and they would enjoy what was offered by the beach. And every weekend or every other weekend, maybe the husband would come down. But that was all that could afford to travel and do this thing called leisure. But that all began to change, obviously, a little bit in the 20s and 30s, not much, but it was after World War II and in the 1950s when Myrtle Beach really began to develop. In the 1960s, there's a period of growth, expansion, and visibility of our market. 130 new motels built in the Grand Strand in the 1960s. I mean, we've experienced a lot of growth here in the last 3 years and in the last 20 years, but when you think about that, 130 new motels, and they basically were 2 to 4 stories with a flat roof, exterior hallways. They were either L or U-shaped, and the pool was in the middle. Most of them, were known as motor courts. They were family owned. You had a lot of farmers in the western part of the county that would own and operate the hotels in the summer, and then they'd go back to the farming in the spring and the fall. Then we have the expansion of golf. Of course, there's a number of people that need to be recognized for expansion of golf in the 1960s in Myrtle Beach, but one of them obviously is Clay Britton and Myrtle Beach National. And then Myrtle Beach Farms, or Burrs and Chapin, built what we know as the Pines and Palmetto course at Myrtlewood. And golf continued to grow in the early 2000s. Then it became a part of development with planned communities. And golf was one of the things that began to expand our travel season beyond just the summer. We have what we still have today is the spring and golf season. There's other things that have grown that from then. Then, in the 1970s, you have this interesting little real estate develop because of favorable tax laws for passive real estate, this thing called a condominium, which lined the ocean front today. But back then, it was advantageous to own it. You may have not have rented it, but you've got to take advantage of the interest carry that you may have had on a loan or the depreciation and offset that against your taxable income. Can't do that anymore. That changed in 1986. But that was one of the reasons that you had the development of this real estate concept called a condominium. And interesting enough, a story is Craig Wall Sr., all I think are aware of the Wall family, goes down to Florida in the late 60s and early 70s where these condominiums were flourishing and finds 2 gentlemen by the name of Tim Jemison and Paul Malone and brings them back up here, puts them into business, which was called Shakur Realty at the time. Plus Craig Wall had an interest in Dargan Construction Company, who he put those folks in business that are still in existing today. So he was just making money from every angle, right? He was constructing the condominium and then he had his realtors selling it. But that led to the development of a lot of the resorts that we see today. A big issue in 1970s in South Carolina and also nationwide was the Local Government Act, what we also refer to as Home Rule. That's the formation of county governments. Horry County government didn't get formed until 1978. James Frazier, who's deceased now, was probably the longest serving Horry County Council member, was elected in 1978. And I remember him telling me he and the other councilmen had to go to the local bank to guarantee a $12,000 note to start Horry County government. Interesting enough. I mean, and that's not that long ago, 1978. And so you have the formation and roles of county government, and I would suggest to you, and this is just an honest assessment, we recognize that there is we're a large county with a diverse amount of people, and there's always been this divide of the waterway, or now maybe the Walkmall River, of the east side and the west side, and that was where I think it began to really develop. And I would tell you back then, still most of the power and the influence was probably from the central part of the county, but it has moved some to this part of the county because of the money that gets generated from the ocean front. In the 1980s, what happens? Well, we start to take off as a little shopping mecca. George Bishop and Craig Wall and others developed this thing called Walkmall Pottery, which was a huge retail center that sold home decor products, but then wrapped around that center building would be these outlet shops. So, yes, sir.
Could you go back to 1970 please?
Ah.
And talk about Hazel.
Yeah. All right, good point, because it's right there. Thank you. So in 1954, on October the 15th, Hurricane Hazel hits Myrtle Beach. This gentleman right here was living at Smith Motor Court, which is at 3rd Avenue North in Kings Highway. Bob and my father and family, they were living at, what was it, 508 4th Avenue was the address?
501.
501 4th Avenue. It would be right across the side entrance to the First Baptist Church. What I know most about it is that I know in talking to these gentlemen that were here that, the water surge came all the way up to Kings Highway, and you'd find a lot of, destroyed wood and sand in Kings Highway. So that's a pretty good water surge. I don't know that we've ever had one that much.
Dan and Bob went to the Baptist church.
Chester Street. To Chester Street. Didn't make it quite to Kings Highway.
Yeah.
But obviously what that did in terms of what occurred in the late 50s and the 60s is it allowed for the opportunity for the ocean front, not just in Myrtle Beach, but the balance of the Grand Strand, to then begin to redevelop away from these beach houses into a more, at that time, what was a more modern lodge or resort. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for reminding me to do so. So we all of a sudden have this, other retail outlets begin to come to Horry County. In the 1980s, the state passes this thing called accommodations tax. So when you go stay in a hotel, you pay 2%. That money's remitted to the state. Pay more than that, but you pay a 2% state accommodations tax. It's remitted to the state. Some is doled out to the more poorer counties. Most of it comes back to the local jurisdiction where it's collected, but a percentage of it has to be spent on tourism. So for the first time, the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, or the Myrtle Beach CFB, and other convention and visitors bureaus in Charleston and Hilton Head start to have a recurring, regular source of revenue so that they can promote and market the destination out of market. Most of that would be buying billboards and TV ads and printing a catalog and mailing them out. And sometimes they'd even load up on a Trailways bus and they would travel to different Chamber of Commerces up and down, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all the states that continue to come visit here today. And we begin to start to really grow beyond this 90-day seaside village to, a tourism mecca that now is attracting people because they come here for the beach, come here with their family, they come here to play golf, they're able to come here and shop. And then Hurricane Hugo hits on 9/22/89. Again, just allows for a redevelopment of the ocean front, particularly in North Myrtle Beach and Garden City. You saw a lot of the homes that were built in the 40s and 50s be converted to, what you see today, these mega beach houses that can accommodate and entertain as much as 40 people. But Myrtle Beach is able to see some redevelopment on the ocean front from Hurricane Hugo. Quickly, and we'll get through this, and then, so in the 1990s, Myrtle Beach reaches the status of an SMSA, Standard Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is nothing to say that this SMSA now has more than 200,000 permanent residents. What that does is a lot of national chains, hotel, restaurant, retail, they don't ever consider locating at a place until you reach the status of an SMSA. And this was about the time, now we had some chains here, don't get me wrong, but this was about the time that, there was some real outside investment started to occur in looking at Myrtle Beach because now we're identified as an SMSA. There's about 200,000 permanent residents in Horry County at the time. You see the national chain hotels, restaurants, the beginning of sports travel, baseball, softball, soccer, basketball, dance, and cheerleading. I would tell you that 30% of the room nights sold in the Grand Strand today are associated with somebody here that's participating in a sports tourism event. And that's a lot of room nights. The convention center expands in 1993, begin to attract more conventions and meetings. I would tell you that by that time, our travel was about an 8-month season, March to October. You had some travel with Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the New Year's holiday. And then, international paper plans this development called Carolina Florist. It no longer needs that 50,000, that 64,000 acres that it owns. And so it enters into a development agreement with Horry County and starts to sell large land tracts to developers to build the homes and businesses that you see that make up Carolina Forest, which right now today is probably about 50,000 residents. It would be, and I consider Carolina Forest to be 501 to International Drive, Wild Wing to River Oaks Drive. And there's about 50,000 people that live there. And you can see in the paper where they're talking about incorporation. That'll be a very difficult task for them, but it certainly will be the largest municipality in Horry County. It's the largest area. Another thing that was instrumental for Horry County in 1997, we formed the first RIDE committee. We now call it RIDE 1. Horry County adopted a new tax called the hospitality fee. It's a 1.5% fee that you pay on lodging, food, and entertainment. I think in its initial year, it was collecting about $10 million a year. We ended up bonding it over a 22-year plan and partnering with the state, built Highway 22, 31, and other major road projects. But to date, we're in the last couple of years of RIDE 3, which has been funded by RIDE 2 and RIDE 3 were funded by a 1% sales tax, not the hospitality fee. But my point in all of this is since 1997, between RIDE 1, RIDE 2, and RIDE 3, we will have built $3 billion worth of road projects, about 40 different projects. So, that obviously began to open up an opportunity of new and more development in new areas. Yes, ma'am.
With all the development that's going on, do you think that the federal government will be giving us any money with the infrastructure money that all the cities and towns and states are supposed to be getting?
No, ma'am.
No.
No. No. And that we can answer that afterwards, but I don't expect any significant money to come out of the federal government and or the state government. And as the state did help us a lot in RIDE 1, but that $3 billion is local taxes. From 2000 to current, Horry County and Myrtle Beach have vast amounts of undeveloped land, attracting new permanent residents, largely retirees. Tourism continues to expand year-round, and retail and service follows the rooftops. There's more than 200,000 residents in 2000, and now we're exceeding 400,000, the fourth most populous state in the county, behind county in the state, behind Charleston, Greenville, and Richland County. But I will tell you that while we have, I would tell you we have about 500,000 people that are currently living in Horry County. That's the expectation by the, although that wasn't the account in the Census Bureau. But a point that I make to a lot of people is that given our tourists, our day trippers, second homeowners, the employees that come into our market during the day, the average daily population of Horry County probably exceeds 1 million people, and that's year round. In the city of Myrtle Beach, which is only 14 square miles, makes up 2% of the land mass of Horry County. The permanent population by the 2020 census is 38,000, but I would tell you the average daily population is probably approaching 150,000, which requires that $3 billion of road investment, to serve that population, which is an argument we're trying to make to Columbia and Washington of why we do need some investment from the state and federal government. Post-COVID, I don't need to tell you the growth that we've experienced. It's been an unparalleled pace. The three main industries in Horry County are tourism, and then the real estate development associated with tourism, and then obviously with the growing retiree and elderly population, none of you are in that class, that we have here. Obviously, that drives a strong medical economy that we have in Horry County. One thing I will notice and been a part of as having been an elected official, most recently serving on a chairman of an advisory committee that the county appointed, is the east-west divide is continuing to grow. And it challenges us as a unified community sometimes when we're looking to Washington and to Columbia for investment that we may need from those governments. And it's just a natural part of the growth and the parochialism that occurs from that growth. This is, how much time do we have? About an hour?
No, you've got more time.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask him. Does he have more time?
Yeah, okay. This is, so I'm going to move a little bit into the Todd Nance Gray family and a little bit about me and what my life was like growing up, and that won't take as long. But here is a family tree dating back to when Thomas Charles Todd landed in Charleston, moving to Conway. His father, Robert John Todd, eventually followed him. Thomas came here first. And then William John, you remember the name Chestnut Todd that I told you that had that battle with Arthur Benton? And then my great-grandfather, Erasmus Robert Lolly Todd. He was married to Miss Matilda Edge. They had 7 children. Mary Ellen Todd Nance. I think she was the 4th of the 7, Bob?
Better than I.
Okay. And but in 1910, she marries my great-grandfather, Daniel Wayne Nance, who migrated here from the Charlotte area with his brother, Hobby Nance. Hobby eventually goes on down to Myrtle's Inlet, starts a real popular restaurant down there called Nance's Creekfront Oyster House. But Daniel Wayne basically becomes what we know as a master builder. And I've been told that about 75% of what we know as the super block, he built. He would buy the land from Myrtle Beach Farms. The story was he would actually sit down with somebody that needed a building to operate a retail store, to operate a bingo, or to operate a pharmacy. They'd map it out on a napkin. He'd go buy the materials from the Chapin Company and build that building. And sometimes he would sell it, and sometimes he would rent it. And in fact, one of his great-grandsons still owns one of the buildings that's in the super block. That's the only family member that still owns one. One of his children, the only child of his 11 children, their 11 children that's still alive, sold their building to the city when we bought those. I don't know when that was, 2015, but that was on 9th Avenue. But they were, and then Esther Louise Nance Gray is the daughter of Daniel Wayne and Mary Ellen Todd. She married my grandfather, Philip Gray, and then, of course, I'm the son of Dan Gray, who died in 2018. There they are. That is Daniel Wayne Nance and Mary Ellen Todd. They were married in 1910. He died in 1968. She died in 1973, I think is right. Or maybe he died in 65 and she died in 68.
You may have said that, but that's for Nance Plaza is named for
right.
that.
Nance Plaza is named. So again, and he was extremely involved at First Baptist Church, extremely involved in the community. As I said, served as a commissioner of the Dogwood Neck Township, served on the committee that incorporated the city of Myrtle Beach in 1938. He was a compatriot of Simeon Chapin. And so if you know about the Chapin Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that provides several millions of dollars of funding every year to philanthropic and nonprofit and social issues, including this library, I think there's 9 board members of the Chapin Foundation. 5 of them have to be, he was one of the original members of that foundation, and he and 4 other families, a member from their family has to serve on that foundation board today, and his great-grandson, Lawton Benton, is the one that serves in that role on the Chapin Foundation. And Daniel Wayne, William Wayne. Wayne comes from that. Although some people say his name was spelled W-Y-N-N.
Mary was not there too. She ran a boarding house.
She did.
On 7th Avenue.
They lived in a house right at 8th Avenue and Oak Street. Behind them was the jail, which was just a 1-room flat roof cement building. They eventually located to 7th Avenue, where Clay had owned that property for a number of years. It had passed down through the family. She ran a boarding house where a lot of folks come and stay. And then I'd hear stories about she would cook food and take them to the jail, to the person who was in jail behind her, who probably was in jail because he was the Otis of Myrtle Beach. There are my grandparents, Philip Gray and Esther. This is their wedding on June 15th of 1940. This, of course, is Esther's parents that you just met, Daniel Wayne Nance and Mary Ellen Todd. My grandfather, he migrated here in the 30s from Panama City, actually a little community outside of Panama City called Millville, he landed in Georgetown first, then he started working for the Army Corps of Engineers, working on the dredges, building the Intracoastal Waterway. The story is, where do I go meet a nice woman? Well, son, you go to the First Baptist Church. So he goes to the First Baptist Church where he meets here. And this is his parents, Sylvester Gray and Julia Ella, yeah. And that would have been taken in Myrtle Beach on June 15th, 1940. There's a picture of my grandparents, Philip and Esther, on June 15th of 1990, their 50th wedding anniversary. In 1959, they moved from 4th Avenue to 5410 Hampton Circle. And that park there was dedicated that day. It's called Gray Park in honor of my grandparents and all the Gray family members that have contributed to this community. Not all of the family is in that picture. That was on a Friday afternoon at about 2 o'clock, and we had a reception party for them that night. And so not all of the family is there. But Bob that is here, there's Bob, and there's my father, Dan, and Ellen, which is a daughter, and Nelda is a daughter, and then Julia is a daughter. Philip and Esther had 5 children. By the way, Philip, and let me see where I go next. Before I go there, just a little bit, Philip migrated here in the early 40s. He went to work on the naval yards in Virginia where he crafted his welding, came back in 1945, started a company called Gray Welding and Machine Company, which eventually became Graco Steel. That business ceased to operate in 1993. 1956, he opened up Genco Chemicals, which is supplying chemicals and janitorial supplies to the lodging industry that was growing here in the 50s. You remember mentioning it to me? And today, Genco Chemicals still exists in operation, owned and operated by my 3 cousins, Steve Chapman, Julia Singleton, and Gray Heath. And they would have been the children of Ellen. In addition to that, in 1965, he opened Sunco Pools, which is a business that's still in existence today, providing chlorine and other pool supplies to mainly the lodging industry, constructing pools. Bob was the owner of that company for a long time, as well as working in Graco Steel, and now it's operated by Bob's sister and her husband, which are Dan and Nelda Ball. This is Nelda Hill. So I'm proud to say that he had a 4th company too called F&S Seafood, where he sold seafood to restaurants. But to have 2 businesses, 2 small businesses, to continue to operate for that long of a period of time, particularly the competition that they've had to experience that's moved into this marketplace, kudos to those family members and of course to my grandfather. Phil also served on city council from 1948 to 1954. He was elected 3 times for 2-year terms. One of the major initiatives of that time, the current city hall was built in 1949 when Phil was on city council. In addition to that, he was heavily involved into the Shrine organization. He was the Grand Poobah, which is called the Potentate. He also was named a Director General when the South Atlantic Shrine Association was developed in 73, Bob?
73.
In 73, and they held their first convention in Myrtle Beach. And we have a great history and partnership between the city of Myrtle Beach and the Shrine organization today that's a huge economic impact and social impact to our community. In addition to that, another thing, Phil was heavily involved at First Baptist Church. In 1971, he was appointed by Governor Robert McNair and the senior Senator James Stevens of Horry County to be the first chair of Horry Georgetown Technical College. Served 2 4-year terms, and during those 8 years, both the Conway and Georgetown campus were planned, constructed, and opened. So a long history of service, first to his family. So you have to excuse me, we may cry here. First to his family. Well, first to his God and his church, then to his family, and then to his community. But learned that from, his family, but then learned that from the Nance family, who learned it from the Todd family before him. Just a couple. Now, this is my mother's parents. This is J.D. Rogers and Marjorie Morse. She grew up in Murrells Inlet. He grew up in Mullins. Her mother ran a boarding house, bathhouse in Murrells Inlet. That's a picture sometime in the 40s. It's interesting. They lived at 204 North Myrtle Street. Now, I spent a lot of time at 204 North Myrtle Street, which is in the Wheeler Swash section, as did a lot of people. She had the best iced tea, the best tomato sandwich. She could spread the peanut butter around the bread better than anybody. I mean, it was unbelievable. She didn't get past the 6th grade education. He did graduate high school. He couldn't finish college. He He worked for the federal government grading tobacco, but then when they were living here, he worked for a gentleman that loaded cigarette dispensary machines. And he was so proud when he would come home from work because the gentleman that he worked for would pay him in rolls of quarters. And we always wanted to be there on Friday because we knew we were going to get a roll. But that's JD, and she worked at Chapin Department Store, had 5 children, one of them obviously being my mother, who was the second of those 5 children, but never turned a stranger away. I mean, the people that came through that house, and I mean, both sides of my family, I'm just extremely blessed. They have different, one lived at 5410 Hampton Circle on the north end. This is during my lifetime. One lived at 204 North Myrtle Street. They were what I would call laborers. My other grandfather was, a business person, an entrepreneur. So I got to experience a lot of all that you want to experience in life. Bear with me, I'll get through this quickly. This is Marjorie, my grandmother at her older age. This is me and my grandfather at my brother's high school graduation. That's 1981. My mom, she said they never found a wedding certificate of the two of them. And he was quite a bit older than she was. So, hey, we just went with it, right? This is a picture of my parents. I think that might have been in high school. They started dating. Remember, my father grew up until 1959, which is when he was 18 years old. They moved to 5410 Hampton Circle. But prior to that, they lived at 501 4th Avenue, right across from the First Baptist Church. So you go down 4th, you go 1 block down Oak, you go down 3rd, you go 1 block down Myrtle, and there's where my mother was raised. I think that picture is from high school. She graduated in 1960. He graduated in 1959, attended Clemson. She spent a semester at Winthrop. Let's see, sometime in 1960, they eloped and got married at the, got a wedding marriage license at the Clarendon County Courthouse in Manning, South Carolina. There they are, homecoming queen and king in 1959. My father played tight end. Buddy Stires was the starting center of that team. My mother was a cheerleader. She was a junior that year. There's me, that's me, the baby. My sister, Danette, who's 3 years older than I am. My brother, Roger, the smartest man that I know, who's 5 years older than me. My brother, Danny, who's 7 years older than me. And that's my mom's younger sister. She's no longer with us, Joanne Rogers West. But just show you, I'm going to show you little pictures of me just to kind of give you a little bit of what my life was like. There we are now. That is in the backyard at 5410 Hampton Circle at my as we called him, Granddaddy Gray's house. And there's my mother and father and me and my 3 siblings. A lot of family reunions, a lot of Sunday afternoons at 5410 Hampton Circle. I want to talk about a couple people who've had a tremendous impact outside of my grandparents and my parents on me, on my family, and on this community. One of them is this gentleman right here. This is my mom's older brother, Buddy Rogers. He died in September of 2005 at the age of 64. He was a long time. He was a great athlete at Myrtle Beach High School, 3-sport athlete, was an all-star in everything he did. Pick up a tennis racket, pick up a golf club, taught and coached for 45 years of his life, mainly at Coastal Academy and Myrtle Beach High School. Did have some stints at Socastee High School. There I am in the front yard of 204 North Myrtle Street. That's my sister. So I was also a pretty gifted athlete, although I played on some really good teams coming through. But most of my life in the 70s and 80s, surrounded having a ball in my hand. There I am with a football. Although, in the 70s, most of the lifeguards were teachers. So my Uncle Buddy was a teacher. So for about 3 summers, when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, and he did it for more summers than that, you either worked at Peaches Corners, Sloppy Joe's, what's the one that's still on the oceanfront? Oceanfront Bar and Grill, or you were a lifeguard for the lifeguard services. But that's the lifeguard stand at the 2nd Avenue Pier. And so I was his beach monkey. He was living at his parents' house at 204 North Myrtle Street. I spent most of the nights there on the couch, we'd get up in the morning and we'd go to work. We'd put out the chairs and the umbrellas. And back then in those days, you could rent floats. I'd pick up the trash, do that about for an hour or two. Then I spent most of the day either swimming in the water or at the 2nd Avenue Pier playing pool or looking for shark's teeth. He would pay me $2 a day for being his beach monkey, and he gave me a $20 bonus at the end of the summer. There I am, already flirting, trying to impress a girl. There I am again, just in the stand, and that's the 2nd Avenue Pier at that time. That would have probably been about 1974. 1977, we moved to this out in the boonies. It was 38th Avenue was a dirt road. We moved out to Plantation Point. We were the first house of any structure built in Plantation Point. Originally, it was 1826 Arundel Road. Now it's 1865 Arundel Road. It sits adjacent to a big lake that's called Indigo Lake on the tee of the 15th hole of the Palmetto Golf Course. There wasn't anything out there. And they had just cleared all the trees and sold them. And it was Little House on the Prairie, but it was fun. But I'm just showing you that picture because there's a football bigger than me in my hand. There at the Citadel basketball camp, I told you Buddy coached basketball at Coastal Academy and Myrtle Beach and a number of other sports. But he would always take 2 or 3 buses of kids to camps during the summer. We'd go to the Citadel, Clemson, South Carolina, Wake Forest. You may not remember that gentleman. His name is Kenny Denard, who played for the Duke Blue Devils in the late 70s. So that would have probably been about 1978 at the Citadel. I'm 10 years old. Just trying to give you a little. There I am playing baseball for the Red Sox. I played catcher. That was at a baseball field that was behind the old high school, which is now what we call the King's Festival Plaza. Is that what we call it? Where it used to be a Kmart. I think I was trying to be a stud there. My jaw looks a little swollen. I think I got a little chew of tobacco there with me. There I am. That's the old high school. That's one of the all-star teams that we played on. Living at Myrtlewood, got to go play golf. And so there I am. That was in a little kid golf tournament. There's again a person that was instrumental. Buddy never had any children. And so we were always with him. He had a VW camper van. That was the coolest thing. I promise I'm going to get me one of those today and retrofit it. But there I am with my 2 brothers. We'd spend a lot of summers on the road. When he wasn't lifeguarding, we would go visit family members or other friends of his. He went to Marshall University, so we were constantly going to Huntington and seeing friends of his. But it was just, there I am again. So now I'm starting to become a pretty good little athlete. Buddy was that, I think, and he would work with me a lot. There we are playing, that's an all-star football team. That's 1979, so I'm 11 years old. The gentleman who was just sitting there and had to leave, and he's going to be the speaker next month, Thomas Davis, that is him. He was my Little League football coach. That's his younger brother, Tommy, and Steve was sitting with him. Steve and I are the same age. Steve's in there somewhere. There he is right there. Steve Davis, and there's me right there. And I think we won. I don't think we won. We couldn't go to a state championship, but you won the regional championship. There we are. We won the state championship in basketball. That would have been, I think I was 11 years old. There I am right there. Other folks that y'all might see. Come on. There I am playing. All right, so a lot of my life centered around Pepper Gettings Recreation Center. Frank Beckham, Dick Timmerman, Robert Harper were names that were there. I guess I can tell about it now, but I used to work there some in the summer, watering the grass, so that they would give me a key so that I could go to the gym anytime I wanted to go play basketball. So here I am with my older brothers. This gentleman right here, y'all, Steve Taylor of Native Sons. They are all 7 or 8 years older than I am, but there we are playing a little pickup basketball. Another man that was probably very impactful to my life. Who knows who that is? That's Doug Shaw. So Doug moved here in 1968. He had coached 1 year at Strong Thurman High School. He's from Winsboro, where he was on a state championship football, basketball, and baseball team, played tight end at Furman. Worked 1 year at Strong Thurman, followed a guy that he played college with named Elton Brunny, who was the high school football coach at Myrtle Beach at that time, was an assistant for 2 years. Elton no longer wants to teach or coach football, so Doug becomes the head football coach in 1970. He died in 1994 at the age of 52. 25 years. So that makes him taking over the head football job at the age of 27. And what was before him was Elton Brunny and a guy named Charlie Floyd, who also played at Furman. And so here's this newbie taking over. They went 7-4 that first year. Of course, Doug Shaw Memorial Stadium is named after him. There's a picture in high school. I played quarterback and played on some really good teams, played on 2 state championship teams. And there I am being interviewed by Wilford Bennett from the Sun News at the end of one of the games. That's just a picture of me playing. That was actually the last football game that I played in for the Seahawks. I did an opportunity to play in what we call the North-South game, which was an all-star game later on that year. But that was a disappointing day. We lost that day in the 3rd round of the playoffs. We had 17 returning starters out of 22 from a previous state championship team. And we should have won, didn't play well. The game got moved from a Friday to a Sunday because of a real strong rain out. It was the 1st of November, mid-November when that game occurred. So you can imagine that was a sad day in my life, but didn't pick up by my older brothers. Played basketball. There's my sophomore year. Anything stand out about that picture? What you see, Cookie? That was a really good team. We lost in the lower state championship, but we also are the only local team that made it to the finals of the Beach Ball Classic, and we lost to Archbishop Malloy 52-50 because I turned the ball over, and the gentleman went down the court, and I had to foul him, and he made the 2 free throws to win the game. How would somebody remember that?
You don't forget things.
You don't forget that.
You never forget.
There it is. There I am making a no-look pass. And so in the Myrtle Beach, now the John T. Rhodes Sports Center, we have what we call the Buddy Rogers Wall. I just want to read this to you. This was the kind of impact that Buddy had. Buddy Rogers was an outstanding multi-sport student athlete at Myrtle Beach High School. His love for people and of athletics led to a lifelong career of teaching, coaching sports, and the game of life. Buddy was famously known for opening the gym for anyone wanting to work on improving skills or just play a game of pickup. Over his 40-year career, there were many individual and team wins, rewards, and accomplishments. However, he is most remembered and honored through this facility and its purpose for teaching, coaching, and mentoring thousands of young men and women using the virtues of the Buddy List. And the Buddy List is leadership, integrity, sportsmanship, and teamwork. This sits on the wall right in the center of the John T. Rhodes Sports Center. I'll tell you about Buddy. Buddy, when he was coaching at Coastal Academy, which was a private school here from 1968 to about 1993, he coached until 1979 when he and the headmaster were let go, Steve Taylor's dad, Carol Taylor. But back then, in Thanksgiving, Buddy used to have teams from mainly Charlotte or Virginia or Asheville come here and play in a tournament. When he gets fired from Coastal Academy, he then goes to Socastee High School to work for his good friend, Dan D'Antoni. And really, it was Buddy that would have these traveling teams come and play in a basketball tournament that was the precursor to the Beach Ball Classic, which is still a very popular and probably one of the most prestigious high school basketball tournaments in the country. There's a picture of my mother and my siblings in later years. She died on July the 2nd of 2020. And then, I went on to play basketball at Presbyterian College. I'm sorry?
Go Blue Hose.
Go Blue Hose. Came back here in 1990, started working professionally. Got married in 93. First child, Spencer, in 96. Second child, 15 months later in 97. Then the baby, Sydney, was in 2001. But that's coaching Little League football. Obviously, those three are some of the most proudest days in my life. There they are, an adult picture. And now I'm going to get you to the real man. Now, you know what I'm talking about. This is my only grandchild at this time. This is Kyler. He's born to our youngest, Sydney. He was born, he'll be 3 on January the 15th. And that's my pal. That's my little man. And if you don't believe it, just ask him. He tells everybody I'm Granddaddy's grandson. He calls me G-Daddy because he couldn't say Granddaddy when he first started talking. That's the most recent picture. We were actually down in Charleston this weekend. He's sitting on the Cougar at the College of Charleston campus. And he's precious. And there they are having a kiss at snacks for Grandparents' Day at school. He goes to the CDM, which is owned by the Methodist Church. I got to tell you, the curriculum and the things that he's taught there is just unbelievable. I want to spend just a minute or two with you, because I spent 20 years basically on Myrtle Beach City Council, or working through City Council. And these individuals, not all of the individuals that I served with, but are the ones that I served my most amount of time with. And I've got to start thinking about some of the investments that we made while we were on City Council, and and they're still continuing those today. But I just want to share some of it with you because I'm proud to be a part of those efforts. We were the first city in South Carolina to invest in ocean outfalls. So our first project was in 2001. Today we've had 4 that total about $100 million, and that's basically where you're extending the outfall 300 feet out in the ocean, getting rid of those pipes that we see on the beach. The Convention Center Hotel, obviously Market Common, working through, Buddy was the executive director of the Myrtle Beach Air Base Redevelopment Authority, working through the development plan there, which now is a community that's, a lifestyle community that accommodates probably 10,000 residents. I know there's 8,600 registered voters out there, so I'd say there's 10 to 12,000. How would I know that number? A couple of other things, the development of Grand Dunes. We annexed 1,800 acres of property that was owned by Burroughs and Chapin at the time. It included Coastal Grand Mall. The development of the boardwalk in 2010. Something that I'm extremely proud of is the Myrtle Beach Sports Center, now the John T. Rhodes Sports Center. We were the first city in South Carolina to enter into a partnership with Santee Cooper to start burying the power lines underground. So all of Ocean Boulevard in what we call the Hotel District is executed now. Parts of South Kings Highway. Most recently, there was a project done out at Market Common in and around Horry Georgetown Technical College. Harrelson Boulevard, partnering with the county on developing the ITAP, which is the light industrial space that is off of Faro Parkway at the, within the Market Common district. But without making that investment, we would not be able to have what we have there today, which was have a state-of-the-art outpatient VA facility. And now the C Blocks has that facility where that subsea cable will come through, and I think you'll see more development to occur there. We were able to expand Pepper Gettings and Mary C. Recreation Center, the train depot, the Miracle League Field. But I want to tell you something that probably I was most proud to work on, and I was intimately involved in this effort in partnering Burroughs and Chapin, who owned the land, the city who was able to contribute money. At the time, there was a national building company here called Syntex, and I worked with a group of, I worked with a group of elderly African-American folks who grew up in what we know as the Booker T. Washington community. One of them is Mary C. Canty, whose daughter Cookie is here today, who the recreation center on Canal Street is named after, was renamed after her. But they all attended what was known as the Myrtle Beach Colored School, which was located basically on Joe White Avenue. There's a marker there just across the street from the police station. The building got demolished when the road was widened, but there was the committee was formed, and the effort was to rebuild a replica. And so we met for about 9 months to a year, working on a plan to rebuild what is now the Myrtle Beach Color School Education and Museum that sits there on Joe White Avenue, and it replicates what would have looked like with that school. But what was, so when we think about the Convention Center Hotel, the boardwalk, the sports center, Broadway at the beach, Market Common, those are all wonderful assets that our community has. But the experience of working with those people, those individuals, and being a part of that effort, and then, I knew them all, right? But then them welcoming me into their committee and allowing to be a part of that effort is probably one of the most enjoyable and proudest projects that I've ever been a part of. And I hope you have an opportunity to go visit that facility. They have wonderful things and activities out of there. But mostly I wanted to share with you a little bit about Horry County, about Myrtle Beach, a little bit about what it was like for me. And basically for me in the 70s and 80s, it really was the life of Forrest Gump. It was simple. It was easy. I had a lot of family and friends that gave me love and encouragement. And yeah, when I got out of hand, I'd get scolded as well. But it was also just really centered around, I always had a ball in my hand. I either had a basketball or football or a basketball, mainly attributed because we do come from a family of athletes, but my Uncle Buddy, having been a multi-sport athlete and having been so invested in our lives, it was just natural for us to do that. And I had different experiences with my grandparents, with my dad's parents and with my mom's parents. And most of my time was spent with my mother's parents. My grandfather, Philip, I mean, he worked, 60, 70 hours a week, and church and shrine, and my grandmother, Grace, she was just so involved at First Baptist Church. And I've spent so much time at that church and family reunions and gatherings, but it really was a community of love. And we've seen a lot of changes, and I have seen a lot of changes, and some I like and some I don't like, but I accept them. Hey, it is. Life is going to evolve and continue. But, everything I've ever been has always been Myrtle Beach. I've never lived anywhere else other than on a small college campus for 8 months out of over a 4-year period. So I really couldn't experience anything else, but I don't know that I would want to experience anything else. But thank you for allowing me to just ramble and share with you. Yes, Miss Cookie?
I want to publicly say
Come on up.
yeah, come on up.
I can come to you.
I don't think I need a mic. But Wayne, I just want to publicly say to you on behalf of the Historic Myrtle Beach Color School Museum and Education Center, all of the former students and the families, but on behalf of those 9 committee members, from my family, in memory of my mama, I want to thank you for the relationship that you forged and developed with them, but particularly her. There were some days when I got tired of hearing your name.
I became the adopted son of Mary Canning.
Yeah.
So here's my sister, Cookie.
Yeah, as printed in her program, her son, and being acknowledged to have received the Mary C. Canty Service Award during our annual Black History celebration. You meant much to them, but probably more to her. And from her, I learned that you give people their flowers while they're living. The word tells us to give honor to whom honor is due. And I want you to know that those committee members and their family, but the Canty family thanks you for what you did for our mother and that committee.
Thank you, Cookie. We are now approaching an hour, 90 minutes into this. So what questions are there? Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Wayne, I was wondering if Buddy had anything to do with tennis pros coming here in the 90s.
Not as much. Now, Buddy coached both boys and girls tennis at Myrtle Beach High School and actually won several state championships as their coach. Now, he will tell you, honestly, he just drove the bus to the tennis match. And he was not as involved in some of the we did have some tennis tournaments at Kingston Plantation. That was not something he was so involved in. But thank you for reminding me of his tennis. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
How much investment did Chapin put into the Burroughs Corporation when he bought into it?
I don't know that figure's ever been publicly disclosed. I haven't found it. I don't know. But he certainly has made a significant impact into this community. Yeah. Anyone else? No other questions?
I'll ask one or two. I'm not sure that I realized or remembered that Buddy was your uncle.
Yeah.
I did know Buddy, but I don't know that registered in my head. A political question? Sure. What's the hardest part about being on city council in this town? Decision-wise.
Well, let me just preface that to say that the most important thing that the council member does is adopting the annual budget. I mean, that's what establishes your priorities and your goals or your objectives. And being a banker and being an entrepreneur, I had a real acceptance of the budget and understanding of where it came from and where it went out. The most challenging thing, and when you say that all politics is local, it's local. Because you're going to make a decision on a Tuesday afternoon or a Tuesday night, whenever your meeting is, and somewhere in the net on something, you're going to make a decision to rezone a piece of property. You're going to make a decision to not allow a rezoning. You're going to make a decision to raise taxes in a budget. But you're going to do things that the next day are going to directly impact somebody's life. Right. Hopefully, mostly you're doing it positively. But sometimes there may be some individuals that it may be a challenge or negative to them. And somewhere in that next day, either in the aisle of the grocery store or sitting in your church pew, you're going to see that person and you're going to look at them face to face and they're going to say, why did you do that? That's the most challenging thing. And then to be able to give them a 30 or 60 second answer. But because look, what happens in Columbia and Washington, which is also impactful, but we don't see those folks. We don't see them daily after decisions are made. We don't know the decisions are being made till they're 30 days after they're made. So that most challenging thing is that you're going to make a decision and you're going to see those folks that you impacted. Now, most of the time, we were making decisions that impacted people positively. And so the most rewarding thing about all of that is what Cookie just gave me a little tribute to, is when you see the smile on somebody's face because you've just helped them or reminded them or made them feel important. That was the most rewarding thing that you take away from those experiences.
In the same, we got a Sally, go ahead.
Love hearing all your history and all, of course, about Myrtle Beach and Horry County. Let's switch from history to future. In 10 years, where do you see yourself, other than still being the best granddaddy, which he is the absolute best granddaddy I've ever met. And but do you see yourself with public service, elected service, or?
I promise I didn't put Sally up to this question.
Well, maybe I could embarrass him with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Well, thank you, Cookie. As you can see from my family tree, right, there's been a lot of public service. And that public service can be in a lot of ways. Appointed, volunteer, in your school, in your church, in your community, coaching. I absolutely adored the time that I spent as an elected official. And I continue to serve as an appointed official in certain roles. I just finished serving on an advisory committee for the county. And so when opportunities present themselves that I feel like my experiences and skill sets can attribute, I certainly will look to explore those. And that could be in appointed office or elected office.
Anybody else? We're running long.
Buddy, go.
How about the Ride 4? Where is that going?
Yeah. Okay. So Buddy asked me about Ride 4. So that was the committee I served as the chairman of the next sales tax for road funding plan, which will be a referendum decision by the citizens of Horry County in 2004. I was on advisory committee. We spent 8 months completing a body of work, which we've presented. Now there is a new committee made up of 6 committee members, 3 appointed by Horry County, 1 by North Myrtle, 1 by Myrtle, and 1 by Conway. Mr. Cecil Patrick, I'm glad to say, is able to represent the city of Myrtle Beach on that committee. So they'll pick up our work product and work through the next sales tax for road funding plan. Here's one great thing about that. There's been an amendment to a state statute that allows the county to use the same 1% sales tax, but allows it to go for a longer period of time, up to 25 years. Don't know that they will choose 25 years, but for example, 1% sales tax today collects $125 million a year countywide. You just escalate that over 2%, a 20-year plan would give you $3 billion. And then you could maybe, so there'll be an opportunity for you to vote on that in November of 2024, and I'm sure they'll put forward the best road projects that will do the most amount of good for the most amount of people.
Anybody else? I can ask more questions. Are you?
I'm good.
I won't.
Again, I'm not afraid of
here for a while.
I'm not afraid of a microphone or a camera.
Quickly, before we thank Wayne, I want to recognize Jack Thompson in the back. Jack is here. Jack's birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday, Jack.
I should have passed these around. This is a publication that Jack put out in, what year was this, Jack? 207. I'm number 20. So I was the 20th person that bought a lot of the pictures that you can find. And there's a book here that you can take, that you can look at. It's got pictures of Myrtle Beach over the 75 years that was published in 2013. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got one other thing I need to say.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'll be a little bit presumptuous here, but I pride myself on being very informed and be very detailed. And when I'm working on something, having the most amount of information that I can have. That's just a part of my DNA. I guess it's the banker nature in me. And I felt like when I was on city council, no criticism of my colleagues, but I felt like I was the one that was most informed on whatever issues we were dealing with. And they varied from anything and everything. And when they talk about stealing the microphone and the camera, I did that. But I got to tell you, and I want to give some attributes to Mark Cruitt. Mark is in his 26th year as the public information officer. The only person who knew more than me was Mark. And he said he will be ending his career as public information officer with the city of Myrtle Beach sometime next year, in his 27th year. But the reason I say that is because obviously after a meeting, whether it was a workshop or a regular meeting or a budget workshop or a meeting with another political group, whether it be Horry County or whatever the matters we were working on, and those matters would vary. I mean, it would vary from all types of things, tax policy to development. And so the one who had to know everything about every one of those issues had to be Mark, because he was going to be asked about it from the media. And he could just respond quickly and promptly with the right answer, with the correct answer in the shortest amount of time. And when you walked away, he said, okay, I get it and I understand it. So anyway, I want you to give Mark Cruitt an applause for all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, any other questions?
Jim?
I think the audience would be surprised and interested to hear about the Christmas blizzard of 1989.
The Christmas blizzard of 1989. Well, so 90 days after Hurricane Hugo, we'd get blasted with about 12 inches, 15 inches.
I was in D.C.
You were in D.C. How many? 23 inches? I mean, you want to talk about something shutting down the town. I mean, it shut it down and I was on college break at that time, and I was playing basketball, and I just only had about 4 or 5 days to have a break, and I was worried about I wasn't going to be able to get out of here and get back on campus and get back into practice mode for the balance of the season. But yeah, that was a heavy snowstorm.
All right. Well, thank you, Wayne. Wayne
Thank
Gray,
y'all so much.
former city councilperson, banker, still announces football games. I did a poor job of introducing you at the beginning, but I figured most of the room knew who you were. So, thank you very much for coming. I see Catherine here. She's going to be a speaker. Catherine Hedgepeth is going to be a speaker. Tom Davis was here earlier. So we'll do this once a month in the middle of October. So please come back. Thank you again for being here today.